All right, guys, I just want to tell you that you matter and your story matters. And that seems so basic, but I really just want you to get a hold of that, okay? All right, only you can write your story and only you can touch certain readers. So as Kendra, I'm kind of talking to you here, but just to have courage and faith that there's nobody in the world like you. Nobody has the same set of experiences as you. No one grew up where you grew up, had the parents you had, and we bring all of that to our books. And there are ideal readers, you know, when we meet our ideal readers who have had similar experiences and things just think, that's when the magic happens. So, you know, if I write a story about this canned air I have on my desk, you guys know what that is, right? I call it canned air. It's like the dust off duster stuff. And Peter writes the same story. We're going to have two different stories. So just get a hold of how unique you guys are. So here is imposter syndrome is real, Dallas, and your biggest obstacle will always be yourself. So here's some things about imposter syndrome. Sounds like I'm not a real writer. I'll be a real writer when. I only published one book. I just write. So this is that whole, I just write romance. I just write sci-fi, like whatever it is, we're normally as writers going to try to downgrade ourselves in some way. Anything that discounts your value is a part of imposter syndrome. So here are some of the manifestations of this. So procrastination. So all of these things are sort of a side effect of fear, okay? Because in the end, even imposter syndrome is fear. So when I first got back the edits on Within the Veil, I couldn't open them for 3 days. And I suddenly, you know, was trying to clean every little corner of my house and cook all the historical recipes and do all of these ridiculous things because I was, you know, I was afraid. And I have also found that depression has been a part of imposter syndrome for me. And I have known some writers who suffer from, you know, envy and just trolling the other writers and trolling their comments and their reviews and comparing themselves, you know, and compare yourself with anybody. That is not a wise thing to do, and it's going to steal your joy. I actually had a panic attack the night before Within the Veil was released. And of course, I'm sitting there obsessing about the most ridiculous things like, oh my goodness, I totally said Y-E-R, your instead of your on page 22. I shouldn't have done that. I need to contact Jason in Australia and get him to change the entire thing, and like these crazy like loops we get ourselves into. And then I've also had, you know, the complete loss of hope and just, it doesn't matter. And, you know, my writing is whatever. And I mean, just any kind of hole that you can imagine. I'm sure all of you can relate to this stuff, right?
Yes.
Yes. So be careful what story you're telling yourself, because we're always telling stories to ourselves. And, you know, we're listening. So we need to change the narrative and really start being mindful of this, about what you're thinking during the day, what you're thinking when you're online. And then check yourself, you know, is this some kind of thing rooted in fear? And what we were talking about earlier, you need community. Your tribe will remind you how awesome you are. So even though we totally are awesome and interesting and fun, we don't think we are. And this is some kind of strange writer thing. I don't know, some kind of strange creative artist type deal. Somebody told me years ago at the Pikes Peak Writers Conference that we're not the best judge of our own writing. And that is completely true. One day I think it's awesome. The next day it's garbage. The next day after that, you know, oh, this is totally going to win the Pulitzer. And then the next day after that, you know, why did I even try? So it's very, very strange. And sometimes other writers' faith in us is the only thing that will carry us through. That has happened to me so many times, guys. Like I didn't have anything else. And I couldn't believe anymore for my books. I couldn't believe anymore for myself. And it was those conversations with writers who were just like, look, you know, remember this time, whatever. So we need each other.
Mm.
We totally do. And especially now, you know, social distancing doesn't mean social isolation. And we're all, and I'm pretty bad about this because normally when I'm hurting emotionally, like you won't hear from me. I just disappear. So I tend to be that way. My dad was that way. My sister's that way. So that's something that I have to really be careful about. All right. So here's something that my cousin told me years ago. And this was back when I was doing freelancing in magazines and stuff. And I was, you know, longing to be a novelist. And he said, Brandy, if you throw enough stuff against the wall, something's bound to stick. And Dallas right now is saying, whatever, Brandy, I think. But it's true. Perseverance is key. And I wish I had an easy answer for why it takes so long. But I really do suspect that it has to do with our personal transformation, guys, and what's being worked out inside of us. Because ultimately, what we go through, what we learn makes its way on the page, and readers need that. So we have to go through the hard work ourselves. Never stop learning, okay? Always be teachable. I was sitting at the table one time with Jerry Jenkins, and he said, once you think you've made it, you've lost. And that really, really stuck with me. It doesn't matter how many books you publish, how many reviews, if you get on the New York Times, you know, whatever, because just really get that down, guys. Once you think you've made it, you've lost. Always be teachable and always be trying to pay it forward to other writers. And I just want you to know that someone is waiting for your words. And if you haven't been published yet, maybe that doesn't seem possible, but it's true, all right? Especially now, stories are light, and light is precious in a world so dark. Guys, when my dad died, I was in such a low place, and it was a fluffy romance novel that got me out of the pit, okay? I mean, that's a really good work. And then there was another time I was going through something in Colorado, and I just, you know, I disappeared into another novel, and I was able to have the courage to come up out of that and live my life. Well, there are people out there like that, waiting for what you're going to give them, waiting for what you carry. You carry hope, okay? And just because you might write, insert, you know, whatever, and think that your genre or your story is just light or just entertainment, guys, we need hope, we need light, we need story. You may have heard this story. So Neil Gaiman's cousin Helen, that is her in the picture there in the wheelchair. He wrote this tweet on Twitter. He said, my cousin Helen, who is in her 90s now, was in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. She and a bunch of the girls in the ghetto had to do sewing each day. And if you were found with a book, it was an automatic death penalty. She had gotten hold of a copy of Gone with the Wind, and she would take 3 or 4 hours out of her sleeping time each night to read. And then during the hour or so, when they were sewing the next day, she would tell them all the story. These girls were risking certain death for a story. And when she told me that story herself, it actually made what I do feel more important, because giving people stories is not a luxury. It's actually one of the things that you live and die for. Look, you don't know what houses your story will be in. You don't know what those people are dealing with. Understand the importance of what you do, okay? And then the quotes, a review up on top there was, okay, this was a very dark time in my life, and I got on Amazon and she had just left this. I read over 100 books a year and it's August. This has been my favorite book so far. That got me out of the pit, okay?
Yeah.
And she read 100 books and she thought The Cover Deep was the best thing ever. I mean, wow, you know? So there are people who will say that about your stuff. So yeah, it's hard to keep the faith. Yeah, it's hard to push away fear and all the other weird stuff we go through. But this is a battle, and if it wasn't so important, it wouldn't be so difficult.